When we talk about classic Janet Jackson albums, we usually think about 4 albums. Control, where she finally took control of her career and image. Rhythm Nation 1814, a conceptual album covering social justice themes. Janet, a revolutionary sexual liberation. Or The Velvet Rope, an introspective and influential masterpiece. But what happens with the follow-up All For You? A lot of people remember it for its bright-sounding pop singles, All For You or Someone to Call My Lover. But as an album, I feel it often gets overlooked as one of Janet's finest works. Welcome to the Unsleever. In today's video, I'm making a case for All For You, Janet Jackson's 7th studio album, and why I think it deserves to be up there with her classic masterpieces. I will walk you through the era, the singles, the fashion, live performances, and a lot more. As always, I will be unboxing all the vinyl releases from the era. This video is part of a series where I cover albums that I love and that I think deserve their moment to shine. So far, I have covered albums by Mariah, Brandy, Beyonce, and many more. So be sure to check those out after this one and subscribe if you like them. After finishing her successful Velvet Rope tour in January 1999, Janet started the conception of her new album, but it was a personal event that really shaped what All For You would end up becoming. I'm talking about her divorce from Renee Elizondo, who had worked closely throughout her career with Janet. Rumors of their separation started in February 1999, and it was finally confirmed in the summer of 2000. Shockingly, they had been married since 1991, and people only found out of this marriage once they got divorced in 2000. That is wild. And given the delicate situation of Janet's personal life, it would have been expected for Janet to just talk about her heartbreak and frustration over the marriage not working out. Instead, she gave us an album where she explored her newly found freedom as a single woman with mainly upbeat and joyous songs. The album was released on April 23rd in Europe, a day later in the US, and a week earlier in Japan. Introspection and topics like self-worth had characterized Janet's previous album, The Velvet Rope. So for this one, she went in the opposite direction with a much brighter output, both in the music and in the art direction. During the promotion of The Nutty Professor 2 in summer of 2000, she was already talking about the album, and she said that she had started recording, but she had paused it for the making of the movie. At the time, she was also discussing the possibility of bringing in new producers to the album, but she would only confirm the presence of Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Rob Wilder, who was a very well-known hip-hop producer who had produced songs for Busta Rhymes and Jay-Z and was venturing into other sounds. Eventually, only those producers made the final cut of the album. There are a few songs by other producers that were either recorded or offered to Janet, but for different reasons didn't make it into the album. The Neptunes were reported to have worked with Janet on a handful of tracks, but some of them ended up going to one of Janet's musical daughters, Britney Spears. Boys was originally for Janet, as was I'm a Slave for You. Also What It Is with Busta Rhymes that ended up going to Kelis. Other song titles that are flying around are Ecstasy or My Big Secret. I couldn't find any confirmation that these songs were actually recorded, so if you know more info, let me know in the comments. Basement Jaxx were also asked to submit a song for the album, as Janet was a big fan of them.
My favorite CD that I've purchased within the year would be Basement Jaxx.
Basement Jaxx.
Yes, it's they used to be DJs. They're out of London.
Sure.
And I listen to that like crazy. It's house music, and they'll have a different female artist sing each song. It's a really hot CD.
They offered Get Me Off, which Janet declined, and they ended up keeping for their album. They would end up trying again for her album Damita Joe, but once again it didn't work out. There were also collaborations with Outkast and Jay-Z that remain unreleased. A collaboration that I would have loved happening was one with Aaliyah. She talked about it in a radio interview and how they had plans to get together to record a song.
We really tried for this album, and the schedule just didn't work out. But, you know, we're label mates now, so that's still always a possibility. Hopefully we'll hook up and do something together.
Wow.
That would be really nice.
Now, how does that work? Like when someone on a Janet Jackson level asks someone like you on your level to say, you know, I want to work with you. Is that like your management goes back and forth, or do you actually get to make the phone call? How does that work?
Well, me and her had met a few times and actually hung out a few times. So initially we talked instead of going to do it to each other, you know, and then then management got involved to try and make it happen and set up studio time and work out the scheduling. And that's where it got difficult because I was gone for 4 months doing another film, and then she was doing her album, and we just couldn't do it in time for both. We wanted to put on both albums. Her album came out a little bit before mine,
Right.
so it just didn't work this time. But we'll hook up again.
Hopefully, very soon.
Really sad that didn't happen. At some point, there were also rumors of a You and Right remix with Mariah, who was a label mate during this time. But then the glitter debacle happened and probably plans were scrapped. Finally, a song called New Beginning, produced by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, was mentioned in an MTV article but was never released. The first taste we got of the album was Doesn't Really Matter, which was a single release as part of the soundtrack of Nutty Professor 2. It became a huge hit for Janet, reaching #1 on the Hot 100 and gaining great reviews. She wrote this song specifically for the movie, so I do wonder if it wasn't a big hit, whether it would have been included or not. In any case, it laid the groundwork for people to get more excited about the album that would come months later. The title track was the lead single that came out in March of 2001, and it was a monster hit. One of her biggest. It broke many airplay records and stayed at #1 for 7 weeks. Impressively, it made history for being the most added song to pop, urban, and rhythmic radio stations in the US in the week of release. This was back when there was still a lot of separation between genres, and radio support was essential for a song's success. I remember reading somewhere that the label had to ask radio stations to stop playing All For You to give way to the second single, Someone to Call My Lover. I think Someone to Call My Lover was an excellent choice as the second single, and it became a big hit for her as well. The last single from the album was a remix version of Son of a Gun with Missy Elliott, and it didn't do quite as well as the first two. The song had a darker vibe, with Janet showing her frustration and rage towards someone we don't know, even though she claimed in an article that it was directed to a few people that have entered and exited my life. Finally, the super fun and upbeat Come On Get Up was planned as a fourth single, but after the All For You tour, Janet wanted to move on to other things and cancelled any further promotion for the album. I want to talk about the songs that were not released as singles, as there's a lot to love here, and I think that deep cuts is what elevates this album to classic status. Of course, all the singles released are great and they showcase the sound of the album really well, but the first one I want to talk about is You Ain't Right, one of the hardest and harshest songs in Janet's discography. It is rumored to be about Janet's longtime friend and choreographer Tina Landon, who she had a fallout with after the Velvet Rope tour. The Sexy Jam section includes a variety of song and interesting new territory for Janet, from fan favorite When We Ooh to the sweet China Love and the infamous Would You Mind, which was Janet's most sexually explicit song to date. This song had to be taken out of the album after retailers like Walmart refused to sell it, and it was even banned in Singapore. Other tracks are Trust to Try, which builds up on Janet's collection of rock songs like Black Cat or What About, but it adds strings and operatic elements, making it a highlight of the album. As far as songs about her divorce, the most explicitly related to it is Truth, a 7-minute confessional and truly one of Janet's finest ballads. Lastly, Feels So Right and Better Days end the album on an uplifting note. Simplicity and colorful and bright tones characterize the visuals of the era. The album cover was Janet's most straightforward and relaxed we had ever seen her. The cover for the single, which I find superior, clearly points to the sexual themes in a big part of the album while showing a grown, confident Janet. But probably the most iconic visual of the era is the music video for All For You. From the colorful sets to the choreography, the playfulness, and even a homage to her past in the dance break, the video is pure eye candy for Y2K era lovers. Directed by Dave Meyers, one of the most prolific music video directors in pop music. And while All For You was an ode to artifice, Someone to Call My Lover took on a completely different approach, by bringing Janet to the outdoors for most of the video. It was directed by Franz Lawrence, and I think it fits the song so well. The last music video from the era was my personal favorite, Son of a Gun. They used the remix with Missy Elliott and gave it a darker edge that is matched by the nightmarish stalking of the guy that these ghosts or witches are following. As a fun fact, Britney Spears loved the video so much that she used the hotel location for her video of Overprotected Dogchild remix. I recently did an album ranking of Britney Spears on my channel, so be sure to check it out. When it comes to performances, there are two that come to mind as the defining ones from the era. The first one is her VMA performance of Doesn't Really Matter, which was one of the most anticipated of the night, and I remember watching it live and being amazed by it. The second one is the All For You performance at the inaugural MTV Icon show that they dedicated to Janet. She was wearing an iconic Y2K outfit. And if you love that outfit, so did she, because she wore it for quite a few performances of the song. Queen of sustainable fashion, we have to say. We won't talk about Nakama. Most of the All For You performances happened in Europe, and all the other ones from the era are just performances taken from different stops of the tour. The tour started in July of 2001 and ran until February of 2002. It was supposed to come to Europe at the end of 2001, but 9/11 and the panic that came with it led Janet to cancel that leg of the tour. Thankfully, we got an HBO live special from the last date of the tour in Hawaii that was later released in physical format. Critics highly praised both the tour and the special due to the high production, theatrical elements, and choreography. Most critics also noted the evolution of Janet as a performer, who was at the peak of her powers during this tour. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend it, as Janet is one of the blueprints of the big stage shows that we see these days. So what is the legacy of the album? Sadly, I don't think the extent of its influence has been fully claimed yet, which is one of the reasons why I made this video. I think the album may suffer from having been released during the very fertile Y2K years, and it might be lost in that shuffle. It might also be getting lost among Janet's albums, as the 4 albums that preceded it are considered her pinnacle. Critics received the album well, even though there was a little bit of criticism over its length. One thing that surprised me was reading that some critics were finding this album more enjoyable than The Velvet Rope, as the latter is highly regarded today. I think the album has aged really well, and it contains some of Janet's most timeless songs. I also think that the mix of genres should be more celebrated, as she created a cohesive body of work and made it look effortless. Of course, together with the amazing Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who also deserve massive credit for this album. The album's influence can be seen in works by Britney Spears, Tinashe, Rihanna, Ciara, Beyoncé, Normani, among many others. Stay until the end if you want to find out what are my favorite songs on the album. This is the original US pressing that came in a gatefold and plain inner sleeves. The sound is great. It has been very well mastered for vinyl, giving a nice balanced sound with all elements coming through. Only complaint would be a bit of inner group distortion in truth. I have here the picture disc that was released in 2019. The gatefold and design is exactly the same. And actually for the picture disc they chose the same photo that is inside the gatefold. I don't know why they did that, because there's plenty of photos from the era. The sound, as is to be expected, has some surface noise, but not too bad considering it's a picture disc. The single for Doesn't Really Matter comes with a bunch of remixes, and my favorite one is the Jonathan Peters Club mix. It's lovely and breezy, and I love the addition of Spanish guitar to the production. The single for All For You comes with 4 remixes, but to me the highlight is the album version, which is actually 1 minute longer and contains extra ad-libs and an extended outro. The sound is punchy and dynamic. Someone to Call My Lover includes the great So So Def remix and the even greater Velvet mix. But my favorite of the bunch is the Hex Hector McQuail remix. Really great collection of remixes and also great sound. Sadly, Son of a Gun was not released on vinyl with the original cover, but it does sound great. Annoyingly, all these remixes are the clean versions, but there is another vinyl edition that comes with explicit lyrics. I have to get my hands on that one. Lastly, as a bonus, I have her collaboration with Beenie Man, which came out in summer 2002, and I always saw it as an extension of the All For You era. It's a fun, summery bop that fits well the vibe of the album. There are many songs I love, but if I had to pick a top 5, I would put at number 5, Son of a Gun. At number 4, Feels So Right. Number 3 would be Trust to Try. At number 2, I would place You Ain't Right. And my favorite song of the album is When We Ooh. As honorable mentions, I would add Truth, Someone to Call My Lover, and All For You. That's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends as well. Why not? Let me know in the comments what are your favorite memories from the All For You era. Thanks for watching. See you next time.